Well, it's the biggest industry in Metro Detroit. We are getting an idea of how people feel about the Detroit 3 automakers and their cars. Here's a live look at the Rensen with GM being headquartered there for now anyway. But take a look at this list here that's going to pop up. The rankings of those automakers as we try to get the list popped up here. We can show you that ranking here. If I can get to the right script here. There we go. Subaru is number 1. Mazda and Toyota, number 2. Buick is number 3. GMC sitting at number 4. And Honda is number 5. So, to take a deeper dive into the results from the new American Customer Satisfaction Survey, we have somebody to talk about. His name, Forrest Morgeson, a director of research emeritus at the American Customer Satisfaction Index. He's also a professor of marketing at Michigan State, joining us live right now. Thank you so much for being here. If he is here, maybe.
I am here.
There he is. How are you? Sorry,
Good.
It's
Good
us
morning.
being too slow. Hey, so this survey, which we didn't see many of the big three in there except for GM, what does this tell you about how customers feel about not only the cars they're buying, but I guess you could say the domestic products?
Yeah, I think in general what this study shows this year is that automakers have, as they have in the past, done quite well in keeping their customers satisfied. It's a really competitive industry. We see a little bit of a slight decline, but not much, and so it remains one of the more satisfying industries in the country. It looks like the biggest pressures that are coming for the industry really have to do with prices, and this isn't surprising for a lot of industries right now, and customers are feeling a little bit more pinched in what they're paying for new cars.
Yeah. What kind of questions were asked to help determine, what they like and what they don't?
We ask a range of questions, and you can sort of think of it as things that influence customer satisfaction. So, the driving performance of the automobile, how far they can get on a tank of gas or a charge or something in between if they're driving a hybrid. And then we look at core customer experiences like customer satisfaction. And that's important because it's what's driving customers' likelihood of coming back to a brand and their likelihood to say positive things about the brand, those kinds of post-experience elements that are really important for companies.
Were you able to determine what the factor is or the number one factor in purchasing a vehicle?
There's really a variety, and it's different across different companies in that case. What it is that drives an individual consumer to a particular brand is obviously a variety of things, and those can change over time. And we know in this industry that they do change over time. There's a life cycle that we go through, and we purchase different automobiles at different stages of that life cycle. But obviously a big one is price, and a big one is perception of quality, how well they believe based on what they're hearing, what they've experienced in the past, an automobile is going to perform once they purchase it, because it's a long-term investment now.
Being in the Detroit area, obviously Big Three headquartered here, there used to be, I'm not sure if shame is the right word, but there was this thing that was kind of pressed upon us that if you were from this area and you live in this area, you need to buy a Detroit-made vehicle, and that drove purchases for generations. It seems like that maybe hasn't gone by the wayside, but is less of a factor nowadays.
Yeah, I grew up in Southeast Michigan myself, so I know exactly the phenomenon that you're talking about, and I think it still exists to some extent. I think you're right, though. I don't think it's the same sort of powerful force it used to be. And the bottom line is that many of the Asian automakers, for instance, are actually produced right here in the United States somewhere, not in Detroit in many cases, but they're produced here now. And that was an important shift for those automakers to get greater acceptability among the American consumer.
Yeah, going back to my other question about what factors, I'm guessing price is a big one in terms of domestic versus, and I put foreign in air quotes here because a lot of them, again, made here.
Yeah, and I think as our report does a nice job of pointing out, it really is, it's in this industry, in most industries, but in this industry more than others, given the price points that we're talking about here, it's that blend of, is it going to perform well? Is it going to last? Is it going to be dependable over the longer term, given that I may own this car for 7, 10, 12 years? But is it affordable as well? Or, given what I'm getting in terms of the quality, am I perceiving it as a good value? Those are sort of it's a delicate balancing act for automakers to try to hit that middle point.
Right. I don't want to shame any of the automakers here, but what the heck? Who's at the bottom of the list?
You know, unfortunately for those of us in Big Three country, among the mass market brands, we see Stellantis, Jeep, Dodge, Chrysler, Ram, all of them come in at or near the bottom of the list. So that's not great news for them. GM and Ford are sort of in the top half of companies. We do see Subaru, Mazda, and Toyota leading in the mass market brands. We also see Lexus leading in the luxury brands. So maybe not the greatest of news, but certainly competitive performances by GM, finding themselves in the top half for their three major mass market brands, and also with Cadillac as well near the top in luxury brands.
So anything in the research that points to why Stellantis is at the bottom?
There's always a variety of indicators that we can look at here. I can tell you that over the long term, this isn't a particularly surprising finding. We've tended to see through its various iterations over the past couple of decades, Jeep, Dodge, Chrysler, and Ram sort of nearer to the bottom. And so it's not really an unusual finding in this study.
Your background, obviously, with the study, but also in the marketing realm. Is there something that Stellantis, in your opinion, anyway, needs to do to rebrand itself to pull themselves out of this?
That's a tricky question, and it's complicated. I think there's, we don't want to talk about Stellantis as too unified a whole, right? I think there's differing perceptions of some of the different Stellantis brands. There's obviously really popular brands in there in many ways, like the Jeep. The Jeep brands have been enduringly popular for a long time, and they have pretty aggressive and attractive advertising and those kinds of things. But it's hard to say, exactly what each brand would do, and I wouldn't want to commit to that. Sure. In a short form, at least.
Yeah, we can't get it in one soundbite, right? Okay, so any overall takeaways that surprised you in this?
I think the interesting thing is that we saw, some pretty significant negative movement in some of the perceptions of electric vehicles. They're becoming much more common, obviously, becoming a bigger part of the market share of automobiles sold. But we saw a pretty significant drop among those electric vehicles. And so that's going to be interesting to watch as they become a bigger part of the market. Are we going to continue to see that kind of lower level of satisfaction? Consumers really like their hybrid vehicles. They like that they're, again, finding a nice balance there between, limiting their carbon footprint, but also getting longer range out of the vehicle and not having to worry about charging as much as they do with a typical electric vehicle. The industry, it's a very solid industry and has remained so in terms of the way consumers perceive it. And given the prices that we're paying and those increasing prices, the longer term loans that a lot of people are taking out for vehicles now to make them more affordable. It's really going to be interesting to see how it develops. If those vehicles aren't as dependable as consumers expected them to be 5, 6, 10 years from now, right. We could see erosion in the industry and a lot of switching and people looking for new products. So I think it's an evolving situation, interesting to watch.
What's also been interesting is that the conversation surrounding EVs, at least here locally, haven't always been about the vehicles, but more about the infrastructure. As that starts to improve, I imagine there'll be more of a market share in demand for those EVs then. But as that happens, let's say over the next decade, do you anticipate that there might be a shift in consumer satisfaction and you might see different names at the top of this list?
That's absolutely possible and maybe even probable. I think a lot of people, are still hesitant to make the switch to EVs simply because, they don't know about what it takes to keep their car charged. They don't know about the infrastructure they need to put in their home. They don't know about chargers external to their home, what the range is on those chargers. Can I drive my car to northern Michigan for the weekend? Or will I, find myself trapped up in Traverse City? Not that that'd be a punishment, but, that's the kind of thing that you have to keep in mind.
That's a lot of cherries you'll be eating.
Yeah, there's a lot of cherries, probably some wine. But those, the early adopters, they're on board. They have purchased the vehicles. A lot of them love them. You see them more around our neighborhoods now. It's getting those skeptical people to jump on board. And with that updated and expanded infrastructure, I think you'll get some of those later adopters to join join the crew.
Yeah. All right, Forrest with the American Customer Satisfaction Index. Thank you so much, and thank you for your insight into, we can see a survey result, but we don't always understand what it means. So thank you for your time.